So cussing? Just kidding.
The thing that I keep going back to with security is the fact that users don't know what they don't know.
But in terms of how you are going to manage all these sites in bulk and do this development work, we kind of give you kind of a buffet of options.
Not all servers are created equal. Whether they can scale very quickly up to match that viral blog post that you just got, congratulations, by the way, really is made or broken by your server's architecture and how it was put together.
If they're reaching out in support, it's probably because it's urgent, it's scary, something's not working, they're on a deadline, whatever it might be. So being able to get great support is super important, and it's a way for a hosting company to differentiate themselves. Welcome to Impressive Hosting, where we seek to uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. I am your host, Jesse Friedman, and with me today is Jessica Frick from Pressable and Joshua Goode from WP Cloud at Automatic. Welcome both. It's great to have you. Jess, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where can we find you? What are you working on? What's got your interest these days?
Well, I do have one question for you first, though. How many Jessies could we fit on a podcast before they...
Well, this software allows for like up to 10 people, I think. So we could find a few Jessies,
Okay.
Jessicas. Josh is
We'd have a lot of
J.
J's.
We could,
yeah.
I mean, are you open to changing your name, Josh?
I'm pretty...
to a better name, that is.
Better. I'm pretty attached.
Well, fine. I was given the name Jess, so I'm just going to keep it. But I'm really excited to be here with you guys. To answer your question, I get to do operations and product at Pressable, the very best managed WordPress host in the biz. I am biased, but I'm also correct. And when I'm not doing that, I am hanging out with my dogs or playing video games or listening to music.
Nice.
Awesome.
And you live in Florida, right?
Yeah. But not that Florida. So far, nobody has proven that I have taken bath salts. Today.
Off to a great start. On that note, Josh, we got you on the last episode, and we got to learn a little bit about some of the things you've been up to. So recap real quick.
Right.
Who are you? Where are you?
Yeah, so Joshua Goode. I am the WP Cloud Technical Solutions Engineer. And that kind of rolls up a lot of different hats, partner success, technical account management, sales engineering, and then all the way down to onboarding and development, kind of support for integrations. So just really helping our partners get the most out of WP Cloud. I do all this remotely from a rural part of Tennessee, the very far east, southeast corner of Tennessee. And if you've listened to the past episode, you understand that I also try to disconnect from the computer. I'm on it a lot, so you can find me sometimes on the tractor on the farm or brewing a beer.
That's awesome. Jess, let's learn a little bit more about you. So you're working at Pressable.
Yeah.
You're the head of operations.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
So my role has largely just filled in whatever gaps are needed since I got here. It'll be 3 years in February. My background is heavy in ops and product. Product is definitely my biggest love, and I am extremely passionate about our product. And so on a day-to-day basis, right now I'm working a lot with just different programs that we are running, both internally and externally, and also trying to figure out what our roadmap's going to look like for the next year.
It's great. I'm sure there's some exciting stuff on there. So how did you join Automatic, and where were you before that?
So before here, I was with Liquid Web and Nexus. I was director of product over there, and I oversaw all the managed applications hosting. That included WordPress, WooCommerce, Magento. Actually, Liquid Web and Nexus were the first managed WooCommerce solution offered to the market. So that was kind of exciting to go from 0 to 1.
That is cool.
And then before that, I was working adjacent with hosting for Copyblogger Media. They had something called Synthesis, web synthesis back in the day. Yeah. Synthesis later became StudioPress Sites, and so that was acquired by WP Engine, along with StudioPress itself. So
Gotcha.
yeah, and
Okay.
the copy blogger brand still carries on, but that's been sold, and those were some wild times. That was back when hosting was still the wild, wild west. And, we're going to be talking about
Mm.
managed hosting today, but that was when the idea of managed hosting was just getting started. Um,
Yeah.
when everybody wasn't
That's
calling it managed
that's
hosting.
Yeah.
Well, you've actually hit on something that we're gonna cover in depth in this episode. But yeah, prior to that, like, folks don't remember this very often, but the installation of WordPress, for example, came from downloading a zip, FTPing it up to a server. Then we got the 5-minute install. Then hosts started, bundling it by default, and then they started tacking on these management services, and that can range from keeping core updated, adding security features, watching for users being added to the site. There's a variety of things there, but I think you're right. It stemmed from the wild, wild west, and that means that there is no universal definition of what managed hosting is. So, Jessica Frick, what the frick is managed hosting? I couldn't resist for those at home.
You know what? I'm so glad you did. And that's a great question. It's funny as you were talking, I was remembering my first website that I ever hosted was with a company called like Smitten Kitten. And it was some dude with computers in his garage. And like, the website went down and you call him and he goes out and kicks the machine in his garage.
Nice.
Um,
That's one form of management, I guess.
but that's how we did it and we liked it. But today I would say a good analogy would be like real estate. Unmanaged hosting is when you want to buy the lot
Mm.
and you get to design the house and everything that goes in it. You get to pick where the kitchen is and how many outlets you have and, everything that goes along with it, where your different lines are going to be placed. Whereas with managed hosting, it's move-in ready homes. You might get to pick some finishes, but it's kind of built and ready for you. And so
Yeah.
for me, when I'm thinking about the distinction between managed and unmanaged, I'm thinking, a lot of times with good managed hosting, you'll have full access to everything that you need, but you're not going to have root access because it
Okay.
typically will
Mm.
come with a platform. Up until a few years ago, I used to differentiate between managed WordPress hosts, or at least the ones that called themselves that, by whether they had their own interface
Mm.
because there were, some hosts entering the market that were calling themselves managed hosting, but they were still using cPanel
Sure.
or,
Yeah.
a skin for cPanel, some variation of it. But unless they had a custom interface, I wasn't really considering them true managed because to me, managed hosting is an informed experience. Ideally, in best cases, it is a modified experience where, optimizations are made, and some decisions are made on your behalf for you. And
Sure.
in that sense, all managed WordPress hosts are absolutely not equal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's unpack that. So you mentioned the analogy with the real estate market and the house, and I think that analogy is also used by web designers when they're describing building a website for a client, right? And they think about, do you want a theme, which is a move-in ready house, or do you want to design the aesthetics of that house, right?
Yeah.
But we're actually taking this a step back. This analogy needs to come back a whole step because what you're referring to is that move-in ready house comes with decisions that are made, things are curated for you, but it doesn't necessarily impact the front end of the finished result of the website, right?
Mm.
It might affect the performance or the security of it, but it doesn't have anything to do with the design of the website. I just want to clarify that for folks at home. So when we think about that curation for managed hosting, let's break this up into a couple categories. So first off, I think everybody on their mind has, or everybody at home listening to this, probably thinking about security. But the reality situation is that for the most part, users don't always think about security. So where can managed hosting play a part in helping to, harden the security of a website or help to kind of take a step forward in the securing of a website?
So I will answer this in what I think, but what is actual as well. I will share with you that a couple years ago, I bought a Black Friday sale for a competitor that was offering their brand new managed WordPress hosting product for like $6 for the year. And I was like, what the heck? Let's see what happens. And it was the first time in 15 years I've ever been hacked.
Oh, wow.
And I know how to run my sites. Like, I don't leave
Sure.
open doors, which tells me it had to be at the server level. And I am certainly not what I would consider, the best developer, but I know enough to look around, and I don't think there was much of any protection at the server level to isolate my site from other people, or to really protect me from ne'er-do-wells who might be going for the server directly. So what to me that should look like is, distributed denial of service attacks, DDoS, that can take you down by just hitting your site and hitting your site and hitting your site. But also, you need some firewall protection as well to ensure that people can't just go directly for the server to get to you and all of your friends. Because at some level, we want to talk about dedicated servers, and in many cases, it's dedicated ish unless you want to go and buy a box. At some level, they're connected. And so I think a true managed host does a really good job of isolating sites from one another, regardless of how they're selling the product. And that's good for performance too, but security especially, because if you happen to be on the same server as somebody who does not update their plugins, does not care what theme they're running. They bought it or they downloaded it from some sketchy site. And now all of a sudden they're getting 200 Viagra ads per minute. It's got to go somewhere and
Yeah.
it's going to take away from you.
That's a lot of advertising.
It is. And it's a lot of Viagra, if we're
Yeah.
being honest. But it's got to go somewhere. And so I think, there are a lot of people that say managed, but it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. And so when it comes to security, you have to ask those questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, I think we're already hitting a pretty good point is that there are levels to manage hosting, and even on those different levels, there's it's still not a set equivalency amongst hosts all that much. We do see a lot of still in a managed environment, shared hosting where the sites are not isolated as one may expect. So if unless user is really doing their due diligence and their research into what these environments look like, or have certain security expectations, they may come to a rude awakening in terms of what they're actually getting.
I think it's a great point, and it touches on the fact that there is some level of education that users need to be making or doing to be able to make an informed decision. But I think that isolated sites and siloed situations like that should be the base, right? Like it should be something you get for free with any managed WordPress hosting that we're putting in quotes. All right, so the thing that I keep going back to with security is the fact that users don't know what they don't know. And I run into this problem a lot. Right? If you have an experienced agency or developer, they're going to know that backups are important, that some kind of malicious file scanning is important, that understanding vulnerabilities exist in plugins. That stuff's important. But to the typical user, we have to remember this, the WordPress community is made up of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. But the WordPress user base is made up of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. And those people don't always have the experience that they need to manage a website. And, we talked a little about that 5-minute install, the automatic bundling of WordPress. That actually closed the gap for folks to be able to build WordPress websites, right? Like the barrier to entry decreased immensely. But what did that also mean? It meant that less experienced people were now building websites. And when I co-founded Brute Protect, one of the things that we worked on heavily was this cloud-powered brute force protection service, because we knew that the number one entry point for a WordPress website was a bad password. And so how can we isolate those attack vectors and take information that we're learning from a variety of hosting companies and apply that to a real solution to help those customers in real time? But in that work, I did countless user interviews with folks who didn't understand why their site would be hacked, didn't understand why they would need backups. And the reality of the situation is that a lot of times these hackers are going indiscriminately against any domain that gets recently registered, and they're just going to keep hammering on them until they get in. It's not always a targeted attack. They're not always trying to get into your specific website. They're trying to get to the resources that exist behind it so they can do something else malicious. And I think that's something that's really important for users to understand is that you aren't, just because you're running a small mom and pop shop or a personal blog or whatever, it doesn't mean that you won't be targeted by malicious actors.
That's actually one of the reasons why I love that we include Jetpack security at no cost with Pressable. And that's, I don't mean to sound pitchy. Different hosts will use different solutions. There are some other, yeah, look at that. But there are some other solutions out on the market that will protect you at the site level. And obviously, server level protection, you can't replace that with a plugin. But from a site level, it's great to have just a helper to let you know, like, hey, we see something wrong here. You should probably fix this. And Jetpack just makes it super easy to handle for people who are perhaps less experienced, but it has features that are hands off enough that more experienced developers feel comfortable with it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So Pressable includes Jetpack security by default.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. Is that something that Pressable does that's a little bit above and beyond, or do you think that that should be a core requirement of managed hosting companies, not necessarily to provide Jetpack, but to provide those ancillary security products?
That's an interesting question. I don't think it should be required, but I think it needs to be resolved in some way or another. There's services like Patch Stack that you could integrate and have something cool there. I can tell you that by the time this comes out, we'll probably have released it. We have heavily integrated with WP Scan, which is part of Jetpack. But that's going to offer alerts within your Pressable hosting dashboard to let you know if there's a vulnerability somewhere. And eventually, we're going to create a way for you to tie that into your automatic updates. So you're like, hey, every time there's a vulnerability, just go ahead and take care of it for me. It's thinking about those sorts of things so our
That's pretty
customers
cool.
don't have to, that I think app offers that value add. Now that said, you know, there's that spectrum of WordPress user, and the more technical developers and, agencies will have their own workflows, and they don't want Jetpack because it gets in the way of something else they're doing. And so I think it's really important that managed WordPress providers offer a way to get that turned off if they need it, but by default include it because most people don't know that they need it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good
that's
point.
great. I think, again, with the different levels of managed hosting out there, I kind of have my ideal managed hosting setup. And I'm sure we can get into more specifics as we go on. I don't want to override some of that now, but I think security is, one of my big ones is performance, but definitely security. There needs to be some level of security management and kind of not necessarily full on guarantees, but uh, just kind of core tenets of making sure these sites have some level of security. Obviously, you can't always protect against some user intentionally installing some kind of stolen plugin or compromised plugin. That's something that we have to mitigate with tools like Jetpack Scan and WP Scan. But in terms of things that we provide on WP Cloud, we're really trying to kind of set a standard for what managed hosting looks like, and ensure that our partners like Pressable kind of meet those standards as well. So we try to provide them, the hosts, as much of this managed security experience out of the box. And something that we've already touched on is important is site isolation. So anytime if you go to a partner of WP Cloud like Pressable, those sites are isolated. It prevents some other issues like noisy neighbors to an extent. But if one site out there does install a compromised plugin and gets hacked, that's not going to impact one of your other sites.
I love that you said
Yeah.
that. It makes me think of, when I describe Pressable to people that know what WP Cloud is, I try to explain it like an application that lives on top of WP Cloud and allows you to interact with it. Because WP Cloud already comes ready to rock with so many of these features. Like we don't have to worry about that firewall. We don't have to worry about the isolation because that's already taken care of for us. But when you're looking at a managed WordPress host that lives on their own servers that are managed to handle any variety of end use cases, I think it's a different experience overall because it's not built by WordPress for WordPress. And so there's going to be edge cases that maybe aren't quite so edge.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's great. You know what's funny is that every time I walk into one of these episodes, I get a little nervous about how hard I'm going to be pitching WP Cloud, but I get to sit on the sidelines in this episode and not have to worry about it at all.
Well, we
Because what we're really trying to do with this podcast, right, is uncover what makes great WordPress hosting. And I think, we're sitting on the sidelines knowing that WP Cloud is setting a higher standard for that. But we do want to offer, real helpful tips and solutions out there to other hosting companies and help agencies and folks at home understand what it is that they need to do to decide on great hosting.
Well,
And so on that note,
we're not the only host on WP Cloud. I wish we were. I keep trying to tell you to stop selling it, so that, they have to come through us, but I understand. Um,
we're to the people at home, don't listen to that part.
and
but here's the thing, we're not the only one that are on WP Cloud.
That's right.
And I'm excited
right.
to see the market growing in that direction, but the reality is WP Cloud's not for everything. It really sucks for Magento.
That's right. That's right.
You know?
I was like, where is she going
Yeah.
with this? Yes, that's true. WP Cloud is 100% WordPress focused. You're not hosting non-WordPress websites on it. And the thing is that we talked a little bit about, the security, the different core tenets of security that you need to offer. Anything that you're going with, if it's Pressable, Bluehost Cloud, WordPress.com, the list goes on. If it has the WP Cloud logo on it, those security features are being taken care of for you out of the box. So it's less research you're going to have to do. And it still allows you to choose the host that's just right for you. All right, so we covered security. Let's talk about performance. What responsibilities does a host have to performance when they call themselves or are offering a product that's called managed WordPress hosting?
So I have seen this handled a variety of ways at the hosts that I've worked at in the past, and also closely studying the competition. Um, the biggest problem that I will see with performance at this level for most people is this concept of a noisy neighbor. If you have someone who's hanging out in your apartment building and they're making a ton of noise, it's not going to be super cool for you. And that's ultimately what happens in hosting as well. Uh, I think that when the things that we've already discussed aren't addressed with that expert level of insight, um, and action, it trickles down. Now, I think that we have made a lot of decisions with performance based on the wealth of experience that comes with WP Cloud, like, vertical scaling versus horizontal scaling. Most people don't know what that even means. But, when you get a huge explosion of traffic, not all servers are created equal. Whether they can scale very quickly up to match that viral blog post that you just got, congratulations, by the way, really is made or broken by your server's architecture and how it was put together. Um, there's a lot of discount hosts that will give you what is most people don't know what a PHP worker is. And that's, I've long fought against listing PHP workers, but the resources they give you are just not capable of handling serious business. So if you're running a store or anything dynamic, and when I say dynamic, I mean anything that may be interactive in any way. It's not a brochure. Even if people are just filling out forms or buying things, that's absolutely dynamic. And I think you really need to understand what is under the hood before you build on a cheap managed host, because those things just aren't taken care of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think performance is probably one where I see some of the most unique, approaches to it. We have hosts that are very opinionated on certain approaches, some that kind of leave it as a kind of open sandbox, allowing users to do a lot of different things. And I think one of the best things is perhaps a middle ground of that. Of course, at WP Cloud, we have a lot of experience from WordPress VIP, WordPress.com, just millions of sites. So we've really kind of been able to hone in on what works and what works at scale, most importantly. And so, my preferred solution is one that we provide via WP Cloud and our partners, is where we build in object caching by default. We have page caching by default. We have edge caching in our CDN. All of these things kind of built in by default, where you see other hosts may say, okay, we provide this to some extent, but now to really use it, you have to go set up Redis. You have to set up a new database here. You have to install this plugin, turn this toggle on, which, some people really may want that control. But when you're managing many, many sites, whether you're the host or whether you're a customer, some of that becomes very, very cumbersome. And you see a lot of things that just, take a lot of time and maybe just not work as expected. So I think, our approach to where we provide so much out of the box is really fine-tuned for WordPress. It's really fine-tuned for sites that need to scale, especially WooCommerce sites that I think we kind of hit the nail on the head pretty well.
Can I say something spicy?
Yes.
Yeah.
I am so glad that we are not dependent on Cloudflare to deliver that kind of performance.
Yeah.
That is a trend that I'm seeing among a lot of more expensive managed WordPress hosts. They are partnering with Cloudflare to handle that dirty work for them. And it's yet another third party you can't control.
Yeah. And not to get too technical
Yeah,
right
that's a
now,
great point, Jess.
but WP Cloud, I'm not trying to really promote this. As I say all these things is WP Cloud, I'm kind of in the context of this discussion, I'm really hoping that whether a host comes and uses and partners with WP Cloud or not, obviously I would really like it if people do, but whether they do it or not, I just hope that people can look to WP Cloud and look to partners like Pressable to see kind of this higher bar of what managed hosting should look like and can be. So as I talk about these things and brag on what we do, if anything, if you don't plan on using us, that's fine. But hopefully you can look at what we're doing just so we can have a better community experience across the board so users are served. And one benefit of WP Cloud is we provide some of these great features. It allows our partners like Pressable to really take advantage of those and sometimes take advantage of those into unique ways to really set themselves apart. But then they get to take all that time to where they're not building out some of this to really focus on their unique features to set them even further apart. And I think Pressable's done a really excellent job on that, providing things, that WordPress.com and Bluehost Cloud may not at this time, and really allowing them to have an amazing product of their own. Because you're not, there are things to where we do things in a certain way on WP Cloud, but you're not limited to that. You have so much more potential and so much more time and resources that you can invest making a unique, diverse product. So going back to what I was saying though, about Cloudflare, great company. We definitely see users use their service, but WP Cloud has an Anycast network. So what really powers a lot of what Cloudflare is doing is an Anycast network. I recommend reading the Wikipedia article or even one of Cloudflare's articles on it. That's built in by default on WP Cloud. All WP Cloud hosted sites on Pressable elsewhere are part of an Anycast network. So that's providing a lot of protections for DDoS. It's also building in these direct points of connection. So an end user is connected to their closest regional server and oftentimes served cache right from that regional server there without the need of adding some other layer like a Cloudflare CDN.
Jess, you touched on the thing about Cloudflare being that you're relying on another service, and at the same time, you don't have control over that service.
Yep.
So when you're going with a hosting company that is leveraging Cloudflare, putting it in front of their own architecture, they're using that typically to speed up those websites, and they get a lot of stuff, we'll say for free, that they can give to those customers, but they're paying for it.
But so are you.
So on the face of it, sure, right, of course. But what I'm saying is that Cloudflare comes with a lot of the stuff out of the box, and I think you hit on something that's super important there, which is that folks at home probably think to themselves, like, what's wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with using Cloudflare? And they're like, Cloudflare itself is not necessarily it's not a bad product. It's not anything that you should, or maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not an expert in it. But what I'm getting to is the fact that, like, when you are relying on something to be successful and you don't have the control over that, you can't switch it off or on, and you can't configure it. You can't change it the way you want to change it. That's adding another layer of risk into the performance of that site. And so I think that's something that's really important for people to think about at home when you're evaluating managed hosting. What other technologies are being layered in there that you have less control over?
And are they going to give you control over whether you have to use them or not? At
Yeah.
Pressable, you can flip our edge caching on or off. If you have certain plugins you want to use instead, I don't recommend it because our edge caching really does rock. But you could turn that off if you had your own special way that you wanted to do it. Not all services will let you opt out of that because, I mean, again, the spicy word that I'm thinking is they need it as a crutch to make up for other things that they're not doing that we would perhaps do. Um, but again, it depends on where they're cutting the corners, and I think it would require a certain level of technical prowess to know. But that's why I love seeing neutral third-party performance reports. Something like WP Hosting Benchmarks. Review Signal does these every year. They didn't do it this year, but he doesn't turn on, those special caching for all of the tests. So you can see how good they are really with and without the caching. And that's good
Yeah,
for most
Review Signal
normies.
runs hosting benchmarks for folks at home. Our first episode was actually with Kevin Ohashi,
Isn't he so
and
great?
yeah, he was a great guest, and he's a great guy, and he's doing a lot of great work around helping to elevate the hosting companies that are doing really, really well out there, so that you can make an informed decision around performance and reliability.
Well, and that's the thing is a lot of times you'll see on websites, they, show their own performance numbers, and you always have to approach that with a grain of salt because I can also show you performance numbers where I am the top winner of all things ever. Um,
That's right.
That's right. That's yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure that's a list that's powered by WordPress too, right?
Naturally.
Of course. All right, so we talked about security, we talked about performance. What about reliability? If you're offering managed WordPress hosting versus just any other type of hosting,
Mm.
do you have a higher responsibility to reliability, or is it just a default that every type of hosting should be as setting a higher standard there?
So when you say reliability, I think depending on who's listening, that may mean a couple different things. For
Sure. Yeah.
me, when I hear reliability, I am thinking about uptime.
Mm-hmm.
When normies hear the word reliability, they're like, can I count on you?
Mm.
And so that kind of leads
Yeah.
into a support conversation. I'll pause on that one and I'll go with the technical reliability first. At Pressable, we have a SLA, a service level agreement that promises 100% uptime. Now, when you hear 100% uptime, most people who are technologically savvy will know that's literally not possible in computing. It's always 99.9999999 whatever, because computers are computers. But the thing is, we are so confident that you're not going to find our service to be unreliable that we're going to back it up with that SLA. And the reason is, you know, again, pitching for WP Cloud. You guys had me on here because I'm a WP Cloud fangirl. Isn't that why you asked me? But WP
I think
Cloud,
it has something to do with your expertise.
okay. I'm a little
I'm
nerdy, but
leaning
I'm
towards
also a
that.
fangirl. So anyway, we're
Okay.
here, we're doing it. WP Cloud has highly available geo-redundant automatic failover. And so for normies, what that means is if something goes wrong at the server level, we have an instant automatic copy that we shift your domain to. So instead of looking for your site over here, we're going to have it go over here. And for most of your visitors, there's absolutely no difference. And for you, you don't have to do anything. We take care of it all in the background. Your site never goes down if there's a fire in one of our data centers. And that to me is what I think of when we're talking about reliability. Um,
Sure.
you can do everything that you want to do to make sure your sites are up and stable. But going back to my smitten kitten guy, you don't know if he's going to have a flood in his garage where your box is
Right.
sitting. And so having that really means a lot. Now, people talk about high availability and they will charge like an extra zero at the end of your monthly bill just so that they can give that to you. I think most people are shocked when they find out that we offer that even on our $25 plan.
Yeah.
Now back to the other kind of reliability,
Actually, before we jump into that, because I do want to go into that realm, but when you think about pricing, I think a lot of times people who are shopping for hosting out there are looking at the cheapest hosting that they can. And that's a constant race to the bottom that we see in the industry. Folks are selling 10 sites, 100 sites for $2, $3, $4 a month. Now, if you've ever had to do support for websites, I'll tell you that whether they're an enterprise customer paying $2,000 a month or they're a small blog and someone's invested in it and they care about their blog and they're paying $2 a month, there's still going to be just as much stress and frustration and anger on the other side of that phone call. And providing that kind of support is not always easy. But those folks, even though they're paying a very inexpensive amount of money, they feel like they deserve to have their site just up and running. And I think that at the end of the day, it's important for folks to remember that, like, if you're paying Pressable or Bluehost Cloud or somebody else, say a couple dozen dollars a month, like 20, 24, $25 a month, and you don't have to think about downtime and you don't have to think about your site experiencing those kinds of issues. Is that not worth a couple cups of coffee a month? I mean, the $3 a month is not making any promises to you, right?
It's cheaper than rent, but to the defense of those that spend $5 a month, to them, they're paying for a service, and that service isn't doing their one job, which is
Right.
to host their website successfully. And so I get it, but you have to understand it's like saying I can buy a burger for 99 cents or I can buy a burger for $15. There's going to be a difference in the quality of the burger, and you just need to understand that.
That's a great point. We could have made a beer analogy
I
here, so
know.
Josh could have jumped in.
I'm not mad about the beer, but now I want a burger. So we should stick to the real
Do
estate
your
analogies, you
beers pair
guys.
nicely with burgers there, Josh?
Oh yeah, we have some specifically. Well, there's a whole kind of course out there in the beer world as opposed to the wine world. There in the beer world, it's called the Cicerone, and so there's a whole thing in terms of pairing and stuff that goes along with that certification. So yeah, we can definitely do some specifically suited for burgers.
That's awesome.
But if we're going to do beer, there's a very big difference between Josh's latest brew and a Schlitz.
He takes us back to the pricing, right?
Yeah.
That's great. All right, so Jess, before I interrupted you there, we were talking about reliability from a different perspective.
Yeah, and it kind of dovetails with that. Can I count on you? You have one job, and sometimes when the job is not being done or you have a question about it, you expect to be able to talk to somebody that can help you. And people are often shocked that those $3 hosts don't actually have people you could talk to help you. They send you to a forum, or, a bot can answer some questions poorly, and then they promise to get back to you in 3 to 5 days if they didn't. Those are real things that live out there. I think it's hard to tell the story of reliability in that sense, because how do you quantify an experience? Everybody says it's great.
I think one thing that you're touching on there that's really important to think about is the intent and the motivation that user has at that moment. If they have something that they need to learn or achieve, and they can't do it on their own, and it's not pressing, it's not an emergency, they'll start by doing some research. They'll look at documentation. They'll ask other people how you do it. If they're reaching out in support, it's probably because it's urgent, it's scary, something's not working, they're on a deadline, whatever it might be. So being able to get great support is super important, and it's a way for a hosting company to differentiate themselves. And we've been talking a lot about WP Cloud and Pressable, but I will give, and we talked a little bit about before about how you have WP Cloud underneath that infrastructure, and then you have Pressable layered on top of it to give their own diverse answer to what is WordPress hosting, right? Bluehost Cloud actually runs on WP Cloud, and it comes with tier 3 phone support 24/7, 365. So you can pick up the phone and you can talk to somebody who actually knows how to build a WordPress website instantaneously. And I think that goes to raising the bar for managed hosting for sure. What is the typical support solution for Pressable?
So for me, reliable support would be you can get your question answered one way or another. At Pressable, we really work hard to make sure our documentation is up to date. If you're shopping around, I would encourage you to look at a host's documentation. Can you find
Absolutely.
answers to most of your questions? And is it speaking at your level, not, above, below, or somewhere else? And then I also encourage people to test their support. When you chat in or submit a ticket or a phone call, are you talking to somebody who, number one, is human? Um, and if they're not human, are they at least good? And then you can eventually get to a human. Um, and is the human able to understand what you're asking? Or is it, reading from a script? Or are they basically doing what you could have done with Google? Do you feel like you're
Yeah.
being heard? One of the things at Pressable, everybody goes through the same rigorous hiring process, and people here know, love, live, and breathe WordPress. It's what we do. We can't
Right.
fix your VCR. We're not going to be able to tell you what to do with your Squarespace, but we know WordPress. Um, I think there are some companies that also sell WordPress, and so you're not going to get that specialized expertise there. If you have specific hosting questions, they may be great, but they're not going to be able to tell you if a specific plugin is causing problems or, if there's a conflict between what we do and what you do necessarily. Um, and I think that that also creates some frustration on behalf of customers because it's very easy to say, well, you're using this plugin, go talk to them. And then the plugin providers say, wait a minute, no, it's not my plugin. Why did they send you to
Yeah.
me? And now they won't ever recommend that host. And it just goes around and around.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time working with hosting companies from the Jetpack side to make sure that we got warm handoffs so that they weren't just saying, hey, it's Jetpack's problem, go solve for it yourself. Now, a lot of those hosting companies can actually just pass that feedback on to us, or we've actually even provided training to hosting companies so that they can actually support those simpler questions. I think that's great about the documentation, especially something that's free for you to review before you even sign up for a hosting company.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we even include API documentation that's not behind a login. So you can really see what you're getting before you buy.
That's great. And actually, API leads us to another question, which is around managed WordPress hosting. What development tools do we need to offer to agencies or developers who are out there building hosting into their workflows? Because it's not just about putting up a website and launching it and walking away. It's about, the delivery of code. It's about updating things. It's about keeping it all moving. And those agencies have to bill those hours. So the faster they can work on procedural stuff like that, the more money they can actually bring in as a company.
That's a great question. Um, my answer may be different than other people's answers, but I think this is a great opportunity to be a little more informed. You need to be talking to the developers that are using your platform. Um, for me, I would say base case, you need to give them WP CLI. They have to have SSH. They have to be able to, work with their own preferred workflows. Git integration is table stakes for developers nowadays. Having a solid library of API calls and webhooks. We take it a step further and let you create your own webhooks and custom applications, but you don't even have to go that far. We go there because that's what we've been told people want. Now, people on our platform, you know, Bluehost, another great service, they may not have those kinds of customers. And so their efforts for those kind of developers may be better spent elsewhere. I don't know because I've never interviewed them. Um, but when it comes to a more technical WordPress user, I don't think there's too much that is base and minimum because developers were going to come with their own flows. And I think that's why it's so hard to win their business because they will get used to using something. They build systems around it to be as efficient as possible. And unless something really, 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 really bad has happened, they don't want to change.
Sure.
Yeah.
Josh, if folks at home are listening that aren't super technical, what's SSH and CLI?
Sorry.
No, this is a great opportunity for Josh to just step in and help
Yeah,
kind of
yeah. So
fill those gaps, those knowledge
So
gaps.
just to start, let's just start, why would you want the access? And then we can actually, or why would you want whatever this thing is? And then we can delve more into what it actually is. So I think a good point that Jess made is, there's probably some base layers that you should just provide, because so many developers, agencies, individuals will want to do things their own way or their own learned way. And so as a managed host, you should at least provide them just very basic tool sets such as SSH, CLI, maybe some options for deploying from Git and GitHub. As for what SSH actually is, it's just a very technical, more fancy way of connecting into a server and being able to run various commands. So, and this opens up the door to where you can then write scripts that run these commands. So, to add a layer to that, there's WP CLI, which are WordPress specific commands. So I can go in there, I can connect to a site via SSH. And then once I'm loaded in there, I can run a command like WP user list, and that's going to give me a list of users on the site. And maybe I want to filter that down to just the administrators. And now maybe I want to list out all of the administrators and then reset all of their passwords for whatever reason. Maybe I want to install a theme or a plugin from .wordpress.org, or maybe I want to install it from my own GitHub repo. I can run WP plugin install, put in the URL and force it, and I can choose whether it activates after or not. So these are all just,
I like the idea of resetting all the admin passwords.
hey,
Maybe that comes after a party at your place when they're drinking too much beer or
it's
something.
too much has gone on, or maybe it's too much got on and someone left the computer open and left left it open to install some bad plugins, and we're not sure who did it. So you gotta reset all the passwords to lock it
Yeah.
down a little bit, at least temporarily. But yeah, these are all just tools that just make the development process, and really beyond that, the multiple site management process, being able to script things out and work with these sites in a very automated way, allowing for automated flows. And so, the kind of approach we take with WP Cloud is giving hosts the opportunity to give users this access, like Pressable does for SSH and SFTP. Of course, Pressable's taken it a step further, and they've developed this API, this awesome API that allows these agencies to kind of build their own. They can build their own panels. They can build their own script managers to run countless commands and countless different queries against these sites in bulk, or down to just a select few or just a single site, allowing them to craft their own workflows and get things to match as needed. And so some other hosts may have a very specific way they want you to do things. And for some people that may be fine, but there are a lot of agencies and developers that need a more kind of open-ended thing. And that's where probably we're the most open-ended on WP Cloud and Pressable compared to others. Is, we may be very opinionated on how our caching operates, but in terms of how you are going to manage all these sites in bulk and do this development work, we kind of give you kind of a buffet of options.
That's awesome.
Can I add one
So
thing
we
though?
actually,
So
yeah, go
to
for
what
it.
Joshua was saying, I think the more technical they are, the less they want to actually interact with your interface. They want to
Yeah.
have their own fast way of handling things. But there are other things that you can do for developers to make it really fun and easy to use. One of the things that I love showing off is how fast a site can be set up on Pressable. It's literally 30 seconds. With other hosts, you could be waiting 5 to 6 minutes for a WordPress site to be provisioned. It's little things like that. How
And
fast our DNS is.
you just touched on something that I was about to ask about, Jess. So, we did 2 episodes before this about higher education, and I'm sure there's an easy path for people to think about students in those universities and learning a trade and trying to get a job out there. And I think that one path that a lot of folks are underestimating is a good opportunity for them to make some money and to do some good out there is to create an agency implementer type business. So a developer agency business, right, requires a lot of education. You have to be good at coding and design and everything else. But there's another subset of opportunity out there where folks they set up a WordPress website, they install a theme, or they use the Gutenberg editor, and then they can get a site operational. No code needed, but they do that as a step for like a small mom and pop or a service provider or something like that. Like you own an ice cream shop, you might not have $10,000 to hire an agency to build a website, but you might have $500 to hire somebody to put together a theme for you and just kind of configure the website for you. So in thinking about that and creating more job opportunities out there, Pressable has a cloning tool, right? There's an opportunity there. So what I think that opens up is like, it's such a simple little tool, right? Like from a user's perspective, it's a button, you press it, it replicates a site. But when you think about running a business and trying to get more and more business and move faster, you can configure a WordPress website without any personal information on it, configure it the exact way that you want with the right theme. Maybe you have the right plugins on it. They're configured exactly the right way. And then you can use Pressable to just replicate that. And that'll be a jumping off start for you to have a new website to operate and to build for somebody else without having to go through all the configuration steps. So that could save you a whole billable hour, maybe even more than that.
For sure. For sure. And, you can keep that template or stencil or whatever you want to call it updated. And every time
I like to call it a golden image.
there you go. And every time you recreate it, it's already up to date. Take it a step further. We don't modify WordPress. When you get WordPress from Pressable, it is the real deal as it's meant to be enjoyed. And so that tight integration also lets you extend that even further. So let's say your template or stencil has all your built-in patterns already set up. You could have your custom blocks ready to rock. There are so many opportunities to extend that. And the way that you're saying it, I would say 1 billable hour is on the low end for savings.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, we're getting to the end of this episode. I want to take the time to say thank you to both of you very much for joining us. Jess, I think that we just scratched the surface with this, so I would love to have you back and talk more about managed hosting, WordPress in general, what's going on in your neck of the woods. If anybody wants to follow you at home, where should they go? What website should they visit?
Easiest is probably to visit my website, jessicafrick.com, but make sure you visit pressable.com, and we'll take really good care of you.
Awesome. Thanks. Josh, anything you want to add?
Yeah. So, well, if you're a host and you're interested in what we've talked about a little bit here, definitely visit us over at wp.cloud. We have some good info over there and good ways to contact us. If you want to learn more about me and my beer and my brewing and tractor riding, you can visit Goode. They're like, no, Joshua, do not share. You can go to goode.pro. That's good with an E.pro.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, both of you. Talk to you later.
Bye.